Let's get into some legal stories here, and we begin with a huge development in the Matt Gaetz case. Joel Greenberg, the Gaetz associate and former elected official in Florida, reportedly cooperating with the feds who are investigating the Republican congressman. Greenberg facing more than 30 federal felony charges, including sex trafficking, stalking, bribery, fraud, and the list goes on. Greenberg's attorney says this bad news for Mr. Gaetz.
And you're asking me to get into the mind of Matt Gaetz, right? I'm sure Matt Gaetz is not feeling very comfortable today.
The federal probe of Gaetz grew out of the Greenberg case, and the DOJ reportedly looking into whether or not Gaetz had sex with a minor and paid for her to travel with him across state lines. A spokesman for the congressman says Gaetz did nothing wrong and that he didn't pay for sex. Plus, CNN now reporting it's spoken with women who say they've partied with Gaetz and Greenberg, and they're providing new salacious details about what's going on behind closed doors. One of those women saying Gaetz behaved like a frat type of party boy, her words, and she saw him taking pills that she thought were recreational drugs. The woman also said money would change hands after some of the parties, with digital payments being used. And one of those women also said she got money directly from Greenberg, and some of the money was for sex, but she wouldn't say who she slept with. Now, as on the heels of reporting from the Daily Beast that says Gaetz used Venmo to send Greenberg $900 the next day. Greenberg sent varying amounts to 3 women, adding up to, you guessed it, the same $900. By the way, one of those women, who was 18 at the time, now works in the porn industry. I want to bring in our guest to discuss Gaetz, legal troubles facing Donald Trump, as well as the latest coming out of Minnesota. Welcome to our good friend, federal prosecutor Gene Rossi. Gene, I wouldn't want to be Matt Gaetz right now. It turns out Greenberg, he's been cooperating for a long time. What does that tell you?
I wouldn't want to be Matt Gaetz either. Richard, what it tells me is Joel Greenberg is singing like a canary. And if he's cooperating, it doesn't matter how much baggage he may have in terms of charges he's potentially facing, or that he has already agreed in written plea documents to accept. What they're trying to get from Gaetz, based on my experience with DOJ for almost 30 years, is corroboration, documents, deposits, Venmo, apps, anything that shows that what Joel Greenberg is saying is supported by contemporaneous notes, email, text messages, any form of communication. This spells deep trouble for Congressman Matt Gaetz, deep.
Yeah, and if the allegations are true, beyond being a moral reprobate, what a moron to have this digital paper trail follow him around here, given all the things. And by the way, as a reminder, is when he will try and say this is a political smear attack. This began under the Barr DOJ under the Trump administration. So let's not forget this. Now let's pivot to New York, Gene, and the legal troubles that Donald J. Trump's facing both in the city and the state. This woman, Jennifer Weisselberg, she is considered pivotal to both probes.
I'm a character witness for the control, the misuse of power, for who they are and how they've done things for, 4 decades. I've been close to in the family for 25 years.
Her former father-in-law is a critical player in all of this. Alan Weisselberg, he's the CFO of Trump Organization. By the way, he goes back to Trump's father, let alone through all the time that Donald Trump has been running the show. Weisselberg's considered the eyes and ears for Trump, which means prosecutors are likely trying to leverage and flip him into cooperating. Jennifer already has been meeting and, as you heard, dishing to prosecutors. Manhattan DA Cy Vance, several years of Trump's tax and financial returns already in his possession. His office digging into Trump's business affairs. New York State AG Letitia James, she's running a separate probe here investigating possible tax and insurance fraud. Gene, Weisselberg, we've been talking about him as the white whale for a long time right now. If he cooperates, and there's incentive now given his son and family's exposure here, he would have the goods theoretically on Trump. And what we talked about, paper trail, my God, the records he would have had going back 4 decades.
I did civil and criminal tax cases for the Department of Justice for 11 years. tax records, supporting documents, CPAs are deadly pieces of evidence. And just remember this, Al Capone dodged a lot of bullets, but he got convicted of tax crimes and went away to the big house for 8 years. Alan Weisselberg is to the Donald Trump matter what Joel Greenberg is to the Matt Gaetz. Alan Weisselberg could be the keys to the throne. He knows where the bodies are buried. He knows which books are accurate and which books are fake. Devastating.
Read between the lines for me a little bit. Cy Vance is the outgoing DA. He announced he's not running for re-election. His term obviously ends January. We're going to have a new DA in November. He's already met apparently with Michael Cohen 9 times now, multiple meetings with among the witnesses we just mentioned, Ms. Weisselberg. Does that tell you in terms of how far along he is that he's going to wrap this up before he leaves office?
No. And I'll tell you why. Go back to Barr and Merrick Garland. Bill Barr opened the investigation of Matt Gaetz, and now it's being continued with Merrick Garland, apparently. I don't think this investigation in the Manhattan DA's office is going to slow down one bit with the change in command and the change in administration. And I don't think we're going to wrap it up before Vance leaves, but it could be. But I don't think it's going to matter. They got career prosecutors on this case. They got Mr. Pomerantz, who is a phenomenal, brilliant lawyer that they brought in. They're going to move at a laborious, steady pace. And if it's done before Vance leaves, fine. But they're not going to worry about his departure date.
And I mean, it's an oversimplification, Gene, but I believe in my gut what's going to take down Trump is whether it's trying to dodge the taxes or trying to pay people with free apartments instead of cash, is that he is such a cheat and cheap that some of the problems he's going to have, as you mentioned with the Capone reference here, you know, you can't outrun the IRS, Uncle Sam here, in this case, a scorned ex-wife. It's follow the money.
When the history books are written and they dig in, Donald Trump will not just be the most corrupt president ever. He could arguably be the most corrupt elected official ever to hold office at the federal, state, or local level. And that says a lot. That says a lot.
While I got you, Gene, I want to head to Minneapolis. The Derek Chauvin trial, the prosecution, as we know, rested. The defense, they're at bat now. This could go to the jury as early as next week. For the layman's perspective, the prosecution put on a hell of a case, and we're seeing, to me, what resources get you and don't, where you got a single attorney for the defense here with clearly outgunned on the witness front, let alone he's been dealt a tough case. So far, the prosecution, you would think, feels good about themselves.
Oh, Jesus. I got to say something about Eric Nelson. When you're a defense attorney, now I'm a defense attorney after many years as a prosecutor. You know, when you're dealt a case, he's dealt a hand, and the cards that were given him were awful. That video is just devastating. So he's not only got bad cards to play, he also doesn't have, you know, a bevy, an army of prosecutors writing briefs, doing research beyond the ones that are in the courtroom. So it somewhat feel sorry for the guy. However, the prosecution has put on an excellent case. They had a couple of hiccups, but here's what's important. The case that the defense put on in the last couple of days has helped the prosecution more than the defense. The prosecutors through Cross are using those witnesses to buttress and support their witnesses. And that's a beautiful thing. I predict at the end of the day, you got at least guilty on manslaughter, guilty on third. You may have a hung jury on second degree, maybe an acquittal. The jury may reward Mr. Nelson, if you will, if you can call it that, with an acquittal, but at least 2 convictions, manslaughter and third.
I think we're going to find out sooner than later. Gene, it's always good talking to you. I appreciate you making the time for us. Thank you. All right, everybody, when we come back, it seems like it's always election day somewhere, right? Well, after the break, we're going to hop around the country, and Andrew's going to show you some pivotal races and discuss what they could tell us about where voters stand on the political parties and also the top issues.